8 men witnessed what happened that night. 8 men, and for decades, silence was the only thing they shared. Not because they were forced to keep quiet, not because of contracts, threats, or fear, but because what they saw didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. A man built like a fortress, dropped in seconds by someone half his size. Even they struggled to believe it. So they never told the world. Until now. Memphis, Tennessee, March 15, 1970, Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Graceland Mansion stood like a symbol of power and fame, spread across 13 acres of perfectly maintained land. The iron gates guarded more than just a house, they guarded a legacy. White columns rose proudly at the entrance. The driveway curved like a path leading into another world, a world where music ruled and one man stood above all. Inside, everything reflected success. The living room glowed under the warm light of imported crystal chandeliers. Thick white carpet softened every step. Gold accents shimmered from every corner. Velvet furniture in deep purple and gold created an atmosphere of royalty. And on the walls, history, gold records, framed memories, moments that had changed music forever. Near the grand piano stood the king himself, Elvis Presley. At 35 years old, he was at the peak of his fame. His presence alone filled the room. He wore a custom-made white jumpsuit, decorated with rhinestones that sparkled under the lights. A wide gold belt wrapped around his waist. His high collar framed his unmistakable face. But tonight, Elvis wasn't thinking about music. He was thinking about something else. Karate. Over the past year, it had become more than just a hobby. It was an obsession. He trained daily, practiced relentlessly, earned his black belt under Ed Parker. But Elvis wanted more. He didn't want to be good. He wanted to understand. And everyone had told him the same thing: if you want the best, you learn from Bruce Lee. Bruce had arrived at Graceland 2 hours earlier. The invitation had been personal. Elvis had seen him on television, the Green Hornet. The speed, the presence, it wasn't acting. Something real. Elvis tracked him down through connections in Hollywood and invited him personally. Come to Graceland. Teach me. Bruce accepted. Not for fame, not for money, but for one reason: respect. Because Elvis wasn't pretending. He was serious. And Bruce respected that. Now Bruce stood quietly in the center of the room. Simple. Focused. He wore a black kung fu uniform made of raw silk. Traditional collar buttoned neatly. No shoes. Barefoot on the soft white carpet. At 5 feet 7 inches, around 140 pounds, he didn't look dangerous. Not to someone who didn't understand. But everything about him was controlled. Every movement had purpose. Every breath was measured. His eyes moved subtly, taking in everything. The room, the people, the energy. Nothing escaped him. Across the room, seated on velvet couches arranged in a semicircle, were 5 members of the Memphis Mafia, Elvis's inner circle, his trusted men. Joe Esposito leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching closely. He wasn't just observing, he was analyzing. Sonny West relaxed back into the couch, arms stretched wide, but his eyes were locked on Bruce. Jerry Schilling sat quietly, absorbing everything. Charlie Hodge watched with curiosity. Lamar Fike, unusually silent for once. They had been watching Bruce for over an hour now. Some were impressed, some unsure, but all of them were paying attention. Elvis, however, was completely captivated. He stood close, asking question after question. What is Wing Chun? How does speed overcome strength? What do you mean by no mind? Bruce answered calmly, patiently. He spoke not just of techniques, but philosophy. The mind must be empty, he explained. Like water. Elvis nodded, writing notes into a small leather journal. Water? Bruce gave a slight smile. Water can flow, or it can crash. It adapts to any shape. That is how you must be. The room grew quiet as Elvis absorbed every word. This was what he had been searching for. But not everyone in the room was convinced. Near the doorway stood a man who wasn't impressed at all. Red West, 6 feet 2 inches tall, 340 pounds, a wall of muscle and experience. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, his stance wide and firm. His presence alone changed the atmosphere. He wasn't just another member of the Memphis Mafia. He was security, Elvis's protector for 20 years. Before the fame, before the records, before the world knew the name Elvis Presley, Red had been there. Through everything, he had fought off threats, handled dangerous situations, thrown out troublemakers. He had faced drunk men, armed men, desperate men. And in 20 years, he had never lost a fight. Not once. But Red didn't believe in fancy techniques. He believed in reality, and reality in his world was simple. Size wins. That's what experience had taught him. When someone bigger grabs you, it's over. That was the truth he lived by. So as he watched Bruce demonstrate fast, precise movements, he wasn't impressed. To him, it looked good, but it wasn't real. Bruce demonstrated a Wing Chun trapping technique in the air. Fast hands. Sharp movements. Elvis clapped with excitement. Incredible! Red, you seeing this? Red gave a small grunt. Yeah, I'm seeing it. Bruce turned his head slightly. Their eyes met for a brief moment. No challenge, just awareness. Elvis smiled. Bruce, can you show that again? Of course. Bruce repeated the movement, this time slower, explaining each detail. But something in the room had shifted. Joe Esposito noticed it first. He leaned toward Sonny West and whispered, "Red's about to say something." Sonny glanced over, then nodded slightly. "Yeah, I see it too." Bruce finished his explanation. Elvis was about to ask another question, but before he could, Red stepped forward. "Boss, ask something?" The room fell quiet instantly. Elvis turned. "Sure, Red." Red walked into the center of the room. Slowly, confidently. His size alone made the space feel smaller. "No disrespect to Mr. Lee," Red said calmly, his southern accent clear and steady. "But all these techniques," he paused, "they look real good when nobody's fighting back." Silence. Bruce stood still, listening. Red continued. "In a real situation, against someone bigger, stronger," he stepped closer. "Do they actually work?" Elvis shifted uncomfortably. The tension in the room was now impossible to ignore. But Bruce didn't react, not emotionally, not physically, just calm. Red stopped about 6 feet away. The difference between them was almost unbelievable. A giant standing in front of a much smaller man. "I've been protecting Elvis for 20 years, Red continued. "I've dealt with real threats, real fights." He looked directly at Bruce, and from what I've seen, when it comes down to it, he tapped his chest. "Size matters." Bruce nodded slowly. "You believe size is the most important factor?" Red didn't hesitate. "I don't believe—" He stepped forward 1 more inch. "I know it." Elvis stepped in quickly. "Red, maybe we should," but Bruce raised his hand slightly. "It's okay." His voice was calm, controlled. He looked at Red. "You want to know if what I teach works against someone your size?" Red's eyes locked onto his. "I do!" Bruce didn't smile, didn't react. He simply said, "Then let's find out." And in that moment, everything changed. The room erupted, voices overlapping, concern rising. But 2 men remained completely still, locked in silence, locked in focus. The air inside Graceland changed. What had started as a calm evening of learning had suddenly turned into something else entirely. Something heavier, something real. Voices overlapped across the room. "Elvis, this isn't a good idea, Red. Come on, man, let's just keep it a demonstration." But none of it mattered, because at the center of the room, 2 men stood perfectly still, locked in a silent agreement. Elvis stepped forward quickly, placing himself between them. "Red, this isn't necessary," he said, trying to keep control. "Bruce is our guest." Red didn't take his eyes off Bruce. "Boss, I'm not trying to disrespect him," he replied calmly. "I'm trying to show you reality." Elvis frowned. "You're paying people to teach you self-defense," Red continued. "You need to know what actually works." Before Elvis could respond, Bruce spoke. "It's fine." His voice cut through the tension, not loud, not aggressive, just clear. He stepped slightly forward. "Red has a valid concern." Elvis looked at him. "You sure about this?" Bruce nodded once. "I'm sure." Elvis hesitated. For a moment, he looked between them, his loyal protector, and the man he believed might change how he understood fighting forever. Then finally, "All right," Elvis said slowly. "But this stays controlled." He pointed at both of them. "The second I say stop, you stop. Both of you." Red nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." Bruce simply bowed his head slightly. The Memphis Mafia shifted uneasily. Joe Esposito moved closer to Elvis, ready to step in if things went wrong. Sonny West leaned forward now, no longer relaxed. Jerry Schilling's focus sharpened. Charlie Hodge held his breath. Even Lamar Fike said nothing. The white carpet, once a symbol of luxury, became an arena. Furniture was pushed back just enough. Space cleared. Energy tightened. Red removed his jacket. Underneath, a tight black t-shirt stretched across his massive frame. His arms looked even larger now, muscles defined, heavy, powerful. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, a habit built from years of confrontation. His body knew this moment. Bruce did nothing. No warm-up, no stance, no visible preparation. He simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, breathing steady, eyes focused. The contrast was almost unreal. A giant preparing for impact. A smaller man, completely still. Red raised his hands into a fighting stance. His weight balanced, his posture solid. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Bruce didn't move. Instead, he spoke quietly. "You're sure about this?" Red gave a slight smirk. "Never been more sure." Bruce nodded once. "Then come." Red frowned slightly. "You want me to go first?" Bruce's voice didn't change. "You're the one who believes size wins." A brief pause. "Demonstrate." Something flickered in Red's eyes. Maybe irritation, maybe respect, maybe both. But there was no backing down now. Not in front of Elvis. Not in front of everyone. Red stepped forward. One step. Testing distance. Bruce didn't react. Another step. Closer now. Within range. Still nothing from Bruce. Red made his decision. No hesitation. No second guessing. He would grab him. Use his size. Use his strength. End it quickly. Red lunged forward. Fast for a man his size, both hands reaching out toward Bruce's shoulders. And then, everything changed. Bruce moved. Not backward. Forward. It was so fast that no one in the room fully saw it. His left hand shot up, not to grab, but to intercept. It touched Red's right wrist. Lightly. Barely a push. Barely contact. But it was enough. Red's arm shifted just slightly, just a few inches off its original path. At the exact same moment, Bruce's right hand exploded forward. Open palm. Direct line. No wasted motion. It struck Red right in the solar plexus. A sharp sound cracked through the room. Not loud, but precise. Everything stopped. Red's eyes widened instantly. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Because he couldn't breathe, his body froze. His lungs refused to respond. The strike had hit perfectly. Not brute force precision. His diaphragm spasmed violently. The signal between brain and muscle disrupted. He tried to inhale nothing. His hands dropped instinctively to his chest. Confusion replaced confidence. His knees buckled. 340 pounds. Beginning to fall. Bruce had. He stepped aside. Calm. Controlled. Gravity did the rest. Red hit the white carpet hard. A heavy, echoing thud. The room froze. Elvis stood motionless. His hand halfway to his mouth. Joe Esposito stared in disbelief. Sonny West's eyes widened. Charlie Hodge didn't blink. Lamar Fike whispered, "Jesus Christ." Bruce dropped to one knee beside Red. Calm. "Focus, breathe slowly," he said quietly. "The spasm will pass." But Red couldn't respond. His body was in shock. His mind racing. Nothing made sense. 1 second, he was attacking. The next, he was on the ground. No memory of the middle. No understanding of what just happened. Time stretched. Seconds felt like minutes. Then finally the spasm released. Air rushed into his lungs. A violent gasp. Then another. Then a cough. His body rebooting. Color slowly returned to his face. Bruce remained beside him. Calm. Patient. "That's it," Bruce said softly. "Slow breaths. You're fine." Red rolled onto his back, staring up at the chandelier above. Its light blurred in his vision. His chest rose and fell heavily. His heart pounded like a drum. He tried to process it, tried to understand. But one question repeated in his mind: how long was that? 5 seconds? 10? It felt like nothing. Bruce stood up and extended his hand. Red looked at it for a long moment. Then he took it. And somehow the 140-pound man helped pull up the 340-pound giant. Not through strength, through balance, through leverage. Red stood unsteadily. His body recovered, but something else had taken a hit. His certainty. Elvis rushed forward. "Red, you okay?" Red nodded slowly. "I'm fine, boss." He looked at Bruce, still trying to understand. "What did you do?" Bruce's expression remained respectful. No pride. No arrogance. "I intercepted your attack," he said calmly. "Disrupted your breathing and used your momentum." Red blinked. "I'm 340 pounds." He shook his head. "And you're—" "What?" Bruce gave a small, almost casual reply. "Racer to 138 today." The room went silent again. Because now, they all understood. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't luck. This was something real. And it had just taken exactly. The silence in the room didn't break immediately. It lingered. Heavy. Unbelievable. 8 men stood in that living room, but none of them were the same as they had been 11 seconds earlier. Red West stood there, still catching his breath. His chest rose and fell slowly now, but his mind was racing. He looked down at his own hands. These same hands had handled fights for 20 years. Thrown punches, controlled men, ended threats, and yet they had done nothing. He looked back at Bruce. A man less than half his size. Standing calm. Relaxed. as if nothing had happened. Elvis broke the silence first. A soft laugh escaped him, not mocking, not dismissive, but filled with pure disbelief. "Bruce," he said, shaking his head slightly. "I don't even know what to say." Bruce gave a small, respectful nod. "There's nothing to say." But there was. Everyone in that room felt it. Something had just been proven. Something undeniable. Joe Esposito stepped forward slightly. "How long was that?" he asked. Sonny West glanced at his watch, still trying to process what he had seen. "I started timing when Red moved." He paused and stopped when he hit the ground. Another pause. Then quietly, about 11 seconds. 11 seconds. The number echoed in the room like a statement carved in stone. Red exhaled slowly. 11 seconds. He shook his head. "I've been in fights that lasted 10 minutes against multiple guys." He looked back at Bruce. "And I didn't even last 15. Bruce stepped closer, not as a victor, but as a teacher. "You lasted exactly as long as the situation required," he said calmly. Red frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means the fight ended the moment your balance, your structure, and your breathing were disrupted." Bruce gestured lightly toward Red's. "The human body has limits, no matter how strong it is." Red instinctively touched the spot where he had been struck. "I didn't even feel the hit," he admitted. "It wasn't meant to hurt," Bruce replied. "It was meant to stop you." That answer hit harder than the strike itself. Elvis stepped closer now, completely absorbed. "So, it's not about power." Bruce looked at him. "Power matters," he said, "but precision decides how that power is used." He paused briefly. "Size matters, but it is not everything." Red let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. "That's exactly what I said earlier." He looked down, then back up again. "And I was wrong." Bruce shook his head gently. "No!" Everyone looked at him. "You were not wrong," Bruce continued. "You were incomplete." The word hung in the air. "Incomplete?" Red repeated. "You understand strength, you understand real danger," Bruce said. "That is valuable." He took a small step closer. "But there are other elements you have not explored." "Like what?" Red asked. "Timing." Bruce raised one finger. "Distance." Another. "Angles." Another. "And the understanding of the body's weaknesses." He lowered his hand. "When these come together, size becomes just one factor." The room remained silent again. But this silence was different. This wasn't disbelief anymore. This was learning. Red nodded slowly. For the first time that night, his posture changed. Not defensive, not proud. "Can you teach me?" he asked. The question surprised everyone. Not because of what it meant, but because of who it came from. A man who had never lost a fight was asking to become a student. Bruce looked at him for a moment, not judging, not measuring. Then he nodded. "Yes." Elvis smiled instantly. "That's what I wanted to hear." He placed a hand on Red's shoulder. "You okay, cousin?" Red gave a small nod. "My pride's hurt more than anything else." He smirked slightly. "But I'll survive." A light chuckle spread across the room. The tension finally easing. But the respect remained. Stronger than before. "Bruce," Elvis said, turning back to him, "how often can you come here?" Bruce answered simply, "As often as you need." Elvis didn't hesitate. "Once a week." Then he glanced at Red. "You're training too?" Red nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." Bruce gave a small bow. "It would be my honor." The rest of the evening unfolded differently. No more tension, no more doubt, only curiosity. Questions came one after another. "How did you move that fast? How did you know where to strike? Can anyone learn that?" Bruce answered each one patiently. He demonstrated slowly this time, explaining each movement, each principle. Not just showing how, but explaining why. Red watched more closely than anyone. Every movement, every explanation. Because now he understood something he hadn't before. Fighting wasn't just about force. It was about understanding. As the night came to an end, Bruce prepared to leave. Elvis walked him to the door personally. "Thank you for tonight," Elvis said sincerely. Bruce shook his hand. "You're welcome." Elvis smiled slightly. "Not just for me, for Red." Bruce glanced back toward the living room. Red was sitting quietly now, deep in thought. "He's a good man," Bruce said. Elvis nodded. Bruce gave a slight smile. "Then he will learn quickly." They shook hands once more. Elvis stood at the doorway, watching as Bruce walked across the wide lawn of Graceland, a small figure disappearing into the night. But what he left behind was anything but small. Inside, Red sat on the couch. Joe Esposito sat beside him. "You all right?" Joe asked. Red nodded slowly. "Yeah." He touched his chest again. "He hit me right here." Joe leaned slightly closer. Red exhaled. "I've been hit with bottles, chairs, fists." He shook his head. Nothing ever did that. Joe stayed quiet. Red looked forward, eyes distant. You know what it felt like? What? Like someone turned me off. Joe had a breath. That's exactly what it looked like. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Red gave a short laugh. You know what the worst part is? Joe raised an eyebrow. What? Red looked toward the door where Bruce had left. He was being gentle. Joe smirked slightly. Yeah, that's probably the scary part. Sonny West walked over. You gonna train with him? Red didn't hesitate this time. Every week. He leaned back slightly. I've been protecting Elvis for 20 years. He paused. If there's something that makes me better at that, he looked down at his hands again. I need to learn it. Even if it meant accepting something he never thought he would. That being the biggest man in the room doesn't make you the most dangerous. That night, 8 men witnessed something they would never forget, but they never told the world. Because some stories sound too impossible, too unbelievable. A 340-pound bodyguard defeated in 11 seconds by a 140-pound martial artist in the living room of Elvis Presley. Who would believe that? So they stayed silent. For years. For decades. But the truth remained unchanged. It happened. And in those 11 seconds, a lesson was learned that would stay with Red West for the rest of his life. Not about losing, but about understanding. Because sometimes, it only takes a few seconds.